In Part 2, we shall now examine what Roman Catholic historians and scholars say about baptism by immersion. It is well known to all scholars that the Catholics claim that their church has the right to change rites and ceremonies and determine doctrines, and that this mother church did substitute sprinkling for immersion, and infants for believers. History confirms this alleged fact. Robinson, in his History of Baptism, upon unquestioned authority, states this. In 754, in answer to some monks of Cressy in Brittany, who privately consulted him, Pope Stephen III gave his opinion on 19 questions, one of which is allowed to be the first authentic law for administering baptism by pouring, which, in time, was interpreted to signify sprinkling. The question proposed was whether, in case of necessity occasioned by illness of an infant, it were lawful to baptize by pouring water out of the hand or cup on the head of the infant. Stephen answered, quote, if such a baptism were performed, in such a case of necessity, in the name of the Holy Trinity, it should be held as valid. End of quote. Now this answer of Stephen is the true origin of private baptism and of sprinkling. Now the learned James Basnage says this, quote, that it was not till 557 years after that the legislature, in a council at Ravenna in the year 1311, declared dipping or sprinkling indifferent. This historical fact will enable the reader to understand the foundation of the claims of Catholic scholars. Here is the Catholic Reverend John Milner, Doctor of Divinity, in his book, End of the Religious Controversy. Indeed, Protestants are forced to have recourse to the traditions of the Catholic Church for determining a great number of points which are left doubtful by the sacred text, particularly with respect to the two sacraments which they acknowledge. From the doctrine and practice of the Church alone, they learn that, though Christ, our pattern, was baptized in a river, and the Ethiopian eunuch was led by Philip into the water for the same purpose, the application of it by effusion or aspersion is valid. And that even though Christ says, he that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, infants are susceptible of the benefits of baptism, who are incapable of making an act of faith. If you, my listener, have only been sprinkled for baptism in your unconscious infancy, you need to ponder well where the substitute for what Christ commanded came from. And can you endorse your baptism and thus endorse the Romish apostasy as the true Church of Christ? But this we know, that Christ did not originate a rite or allow his churches to originate one that would make void his own positive commandment. Sprinkling contravenes his command to immerse. An infant baptism contravenes and nullifies his command to immerse believers, which was his express command, as the Catholics themselves admit, as we have seen above. Let us now hear from Catholic Bishop Kendrick on this point.
When Catholicism had consummated her triumphs over paganism in the various countries of Europe, and the regenerated parents were diligently instructed by Catholic priests in the duty of presenting their children to be baptized at the earliest period possible, ages passed away with scarcely an instance of the baptism of adults. Hence, the necessity of receding from the mode of immersion became still more frequent, since the tender infant oftentimes could not be immersed without peril of its life. The cases thus multiplying, the more solemn method fell into gradual disuse, until it has, in most places, been entirely superseded.
Now to conclude this video, let's hear from Sir John Floyer, What he says perfectly sums up this situation. Quote, "The Church of Rome hath drawn short compendiums of both sacraments. In the Eucharist, they use only the wafer, and instead of immersion, they introduce dispersion." End of quote. That's it for today, friends. Stay tuned for future episodes where we'll continue to learn what pedobaptist historians and scholars have to say about baptism by immersion.